Thanks everyone for joining us for our uranium event today. We have a keynote by Warren Irwin, who's CIO and founder of Rosseau Asset Management and a longtime investor in the uranium space. He's going to give us a bit of an overview on the uranium markets and have a little bit of a chat of what's going on. Hi, Warren. Thanks for volunteering to do the keynote today.
Well, thanks for having me, Deborah.
Always a pleasure. So maybe you can give us a little bit of an update on what's going on with the uranium markets right now.
Yeah, well, we've, as you know, I've been re-engaging in the uranium market probably about 6 years ago when I got involved in the early stages of NexGen's big discovery in the Western Athabasca. And in the early days, everybody thought that, we actually had some of our competitors calling NexGen a fraud. It was baloney. What doesn't exist. And over the last 5 or 6 years, obviously, it's been proven up that it's an extraordinary deposit. I remain a shareholder, although not as big as I was originally. At one point, I was over 10% of NexGen, and I've gradually sold over the last 5 or 6 years. So that's sort of my biggest activity here in the uranium space. And over that last 5 or 6 years, I've done a lot of research on uranium and how it's changed from the previous cycle. In the previous cycle, I was very active in South America, in Africa. I was involved in Namibia with the HUSAB. We sold that. I was involved with, co-invested with Polo. We sold that to the Chinese. I was also involved in global uranium in Niger, and also with other projects in Niger, also with U3O8 when they were exploring in Guyana. I've been involved in other African countries also, and I've looked for uranium, around the world at various places. But one great thing about it, especially given the panel you have today, is when you look around the world, and Kazakhstan produces, the rough numbers, approximately 40% of the world's uranium right now, which has really changed quite a bit since the last uranium cycle. It's fascinating how they've come up with such massive production, and the markets has sort of absorbed it over the years. And now price of uranium is a little stronger. We're in the low 50s. As you know, we got into the 60s not that long ago. And but going forward, I think the biggest theme here, there's a couple of really big themes that I'm following. One is when I spoke with Al Gore at the TED conference in Vancouver, probably about 5 years ago, he looked at me as if I had three heads when I said, okay, all well and good, wind power and solar, what about uranium? And he had no response. He has never been asked that question. And when people came up with the stupid name renewables, I don't know what renewables have to do with anything, really. Renewables is the dumbest name in the world, because you should have uranium in there. And then you'll have people say, well, uranium's not renewable. And I say, well, is the sun renewable? The sun will eventually burn out. Is it renewable? Or, well, it's not going to burn out for a very long time. I say, well, we're not going to run out of uranium in this world for a very, very long time. I remember last uranium cycle, we had firms, and this will happen this next uranium cycle if prices get to the crazy levels, certainly inflation adjusted of the past cycle. I think people have run inflation adjusted numbers, and we're looking at peak last cycle was around the equivalent to today's inflation adjusted number, around $200 a pound. And I remember back then, the technology then to extract the uranium from seawater was around the $200, $250 a pound level. So there is, with uranium, as with some other metals, there is a cap at which we have an unlimited supply of uranium that we could take from seawater, but we're quite a ways away from that. But that, for people who are calling for crazy numbers like $5,000 or $1,000 a pound uranium, it's not going to happen. There is a cap long term. And that is the seawater extraction. So meanwhile, we're running around the world looking for high-grade uranium, or as high-grade as we could find, right? So now that the characters like Al Gore and some of the others have watched the disasters both in Texas and in Germany, where Germany's blown $1 trillion on the Al Gore renewables, wind and solar, or the people in the UK who've just watched their wind die down over the winter and weren't generating nearly the amount of wind power they needed to generate electricity. And then you also saw what happened with Texas when you had ice building on top of the the wind turbines, and everybody in Texas froze. Well, the reality is the only option for us going forward as a species on this earth is based on the technology we have is nuclear energy and uranium. If you work out all the math of our nuclear needs or our electrical needs going forward, we need nuclear power. It's the only thing that'll provide stable, non-CO2 generating power. So finally, the clowns like who have been behind renewables, pushing wind and solar, they are starting to figure out that there's a piece missing in that puzzle, and the Europeans are starting to figure it out. It is nuclear power. So that's the first step of the game. The Chinese are smart enough; they figured it out. They're already building many tens of reactors right now, and globally, there's about 50 under construction, and that's off a base of around 440. If you do the math on any projections of EVs, it's all well and good to have electric vehicles running around, but if you're firing them up with coal-fired energy to power these EVs, that's not going to help the world, right? So we need baseload, non-CO2 generating power, and we've dammed up all the rivers, and so we can't be doing that anymore. So we've got nuclear as an option. Nuclear has been grinding away since the 70s on a big scale basis. In the 70s was the biggest previous build out of nuclear power plants in the 70s in the US. 3 Mile Island brought that to a quick halt. And then you had all the environmentalists who jumped on the bandwagon screaming nuclear is bad. And you've seen it all in the old footage. And I've seen advertisements from the 70s where, wind and solar are only answers. And you read the small print at the bottom, sponsored by the Thermal Coal Society of, wherever. And so the thermal coal producers, who were the biggest losers on the switch to nuclear power, were very, very supportive of Greenpeace and others in their efforts to shut down nuclear and create a lot of hype about nuclear. But here we are, half a century later. There have been accidents. Chernobyl was, ridiculous nonsense that caused that. And then you have the major design flaw that wasn't, supervised well enough in Fukushima. And 3 Mile Island was really a non-event. So we've had a very, very safe last half century to prove that nuclear, even under light water technology, has been extraordinarily safe. There have been fewer people killed with nuclear energy than with hydro. And around the world, there have been hydro dams collapsing all the time, wiping out villages and killing hundreds of people downstream. Nuclear has not caused that. And what excites me about nuclear energy going forward, and hence demand for uranium, is the next generation or Gen 4 reactors. And I'm especially concerned about safety because I believe, I think that's one of the main reasons that people have been afraid of nuclear energy, despite their safe track record in the last half century. So the small modular reactors are really exciting, but I like the molten salt reactors. Their fuel is already melted down, so meltdown can't happen, and they are fail safe. So I'm looking forward to some of the new Gen 4 reactors that'll get implemented, and there's some SMRs being built, just started to be built and permitted around the world. That's exciting. The big travesty for mankind has been the environmental groups that have been fighting and remain to fight nuclear energy, which is like Greenpeace is, poster child for that. They were the ones all over nuclear energy in the 70s. They're still anti-nuke right now. Some of the founders of Greenpeace have quit Greenpeace and gone out and said, hey, nuclear energy is the way to go. It's obvious. It's the only way we're ever going to supply the power the world needs. But organizations like Greenpeace have put nuclear research certainly back half a century. So we have a lot of catching up to do. But in the meantime, Gen 4, pretty exciting. And some of these new SMRs, small modular reactors, are going to be very interesting. I also heard of programs where, the U.S. Army is researching super small reactors to replace diesel power generators on some of their more remote locations. And so there's really, really exciting future for uranium, in my opinion.
That's interesting. We hit on a number of the themes that, we wanted to talk about, which are the EV revolution and the problems of the grid and stability of energy supply. I think it's interesting uranium being baseload, whereas a lot of the other renewables, as you call them, or more environmentally friendly options are not. So they are unable to supply a steady stream of power to the grid. So I think that's part of the EV revolution that doesn't make sense to me is people want to buy these cars and they want to plug them in and they think they're getting some sort of clean energy power, but a lot of it's dirty. And also the grid's not equipped to handle a lot of the EVs that are coming on. So it's interesting that uranium can potentially solve that problem. The small modular ones are really interesting. I think I read an article that some of them are being built in Canada. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a few. I'm not 100% sure on the permitting because it just changes all the time. I know that I have a friend of mine who's involved in building SMRs, and they were involved in with Ontario Hydro for the past several years, working on some next gen reactors with Ontario Hydro, and I believe they came in second place. But I knew their technology was pretty amazing. So I'll see what the number. We'll learn more about the winner of that challenge and how they'll come out with it. I forget which one won it, but it was one of the big ones, like a Westinghouse equivalent or something like that. That won the battle for Ontario Hydro for the next gen reactors, and they'll be pretty exciting. And SMRs. There's various places around the world that are building. I believe China's got one going, but it's changing daily, and they're being approved all the time. And it'll be interesting to see how the trials with the SMRs work out.
Especially the small ones that you referenced. I hadn't heard that before. But one of the things that I find kind of interesting is all these mining companies are chasing, ESG and getting ESG points and increasing their ESG rating. I think that's one of the reasons that we've seen some acquisitions in British Columbia of mining assets. It's, I think, the cleanest source of energy in the world because it's mostly hydro. But if you can provide another clean source of energy for mining companies, whether it's by a grid powered by or a system powered by uranium or one of those small generators, I think that could really benefit mining companies. What do you think about that?
No, I'm a big fan of that. I'm hoping we get to a day. Can you believe this? If like this is me as an environmentalist thinking out long term. I'm hoping we get to the day where the nuclear energy is viewed as so safe, so portable, and so reliable that there is a day where you and I will see the explosions as we remove the dams from the rivers that we've destroyed over the years by damming them up, right? So people say, hydro doesn't have pollution. Yeah, the ones we've already destroyed the rivers and killed all the fish and destroyed the habitat and all that stuff. Well, yeah, there's not a lot of that, but it would be good for me to see that, see some of these rivers originally restored to their original flow patterns and that sort of thing. I'm not sure it'll happen. Hydro has a long life. They're long life assets, but we'll see how low we can get the cost of nuclear power. As many people know, the key about nuclear power and how it differs from a lot of other sources, certainly of greenhouse gas and generating power, is, if you look at a natural gas cogen plant where they're generating electricity from burning natural gas, the fuel is by far. The cost of the natural gas is by far the largest input cost, where with uranium, the biggest cost on a nuclear reactor in generating electricity is the capital cost. And the fuel cost, depending, it's around the 5% level. It's a low single digits, right? So the cost of the fuel is not the major determinant, really, of the cost of electrical power out of the nuclear power plants. And that's why these small modular reactors are so revolutionary in that they standardize parts. Let's say we get one of the big manufacturers to standardize on a 300 megawatt power plant. Well, guess what? All the parts are standardized, and if you crank off 50 of them, there will be part centers in North America with parts for those 50 SMRs. There will be standard produced versus the current way we produce nuclear power plants is generally, we do a clean slate design. The design and engineering costs are huge. And then the capital expenditures are huge because you're also looking at a lot of customization, custom parts. So it's like building a custom house versus a subdivision house. Subdivision houses are way cheaper because you just rattle them off. They use the standard design and standard parts, standard sinks. Whereas, if you're building something custom, you're looking at something in from China, South America, Italy, France, and it's the standardization of nuclear power plants for any of the new ones going forward will be a major ability to for uranium energy producers to reduce their costs.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the macro stuff. Our events in support of a charity helping a family that we know in Ukraine being displaced to Poland, hopefully coming to Canada one day. So I'd be remiss to not talk about what's going on in Eastern Europe. What do you think about, I'm not going to ask you what you think about the Russian invasion, but how does it impact the uranium markets?
Well, I think the first thing that has happened, and Putin may or may not realize this, and Russian people may not realize this, is no matter what happens, things are not going to go back to the way they were. Finally, Europe will figure out that all the Russian gas and Russian energy they relied on is not a reliable source of energy for them and an energy source they don't want to use. And at some point, I've been singing this from the rooftop for a very long time. I cannot believe the biggest consumer of uranium, the US, to power their fleet, is relying on Kazakhstan to supply those reactors. It's, in my opinion, it's been outrageous that it's even happened. And today it's proven how outrageous it is. I see in the future, demand for Western uranium will go up and there will be a premium for Western uranium. And I think what will happen then is the Chinese will take the place of North America purchasing uranium, and they'll buy it from the Kazakhs. So we'll have to have to segregate, I think, the supply chain, and that's why it's so exciting that we have some recent very interesting discoveries like ISO and NexGen in the Athabasca Basin. Because if I'm a U.S. power consumer, consumer of uranium and a power producer, even if I'm president of the U.S. or U.S. head of Department of Energy, we would need allies that provide us uranium. And Canada is the closest ally, the U.S.'s best ally. We would be, especially with the new Arrow deposit on stream, we'll be able to supply a significant portion of their energy. Also, it's generally in a normal uranium market, it's Kazakhstan, Australia, and Canada are the biggest producers. So the U.S. in Europe should be relying on Canada and Australia to supply a lot of those needs. As you know, France has a very close relationship with Niger and sources a significant amount of their uranium from Africa, Central Africa. So it'll be more and more important for nuclear energy power plant owners to source uranium from non-Kazakh production, in my opinion, going forward.
You referenced liking the Athabasca Basin for a number of reasons other than just security of supply of uranium. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what makes that region so attractive.
The reason I like investing there, Saskatchewan is viewed as usually in any survey by any of the think tanks out there, it's ranked usually 1 or number 2 mining jurisdiction, best mining jurisdiction in the world. That's the most important thing. When you're operating in the Athabasca Basin, you don't need to talk about human rights. You don't need to talk about you don't need to talk about corruption. You don't need to talk about a lot of the issues that plague, let's say, some countries in Africa. And so it's a good, solid, decent place to work with a lot of expertise. The people of Saskatchewan are fantastic people. Mining is in their culture, in their heritage. The Athabasca Basin, we've been mining it forever. And what's really exciting about it going forward is, especially in the western part, southwestern part, where NexGen's made their discovery, is one of the challenges we've had in the past through Cameco is that Cameco's mines are some of the most complicated mines I've ever I've ever examined. Cigar Lake requiring, needing to utilize jet boring, and McArthur River raised boring. They're in, and they also need a lot of freeze walls, and they're in a sloppy section of the underground in at the unconformity between sort of the sandstone and the basement rocks. It's a very difficult place to mine. You have water issues and you have ground control issues, and they've been very smart and very wise in producing a lot of new technology which allows them to mine this. So what's exciting about NexGen is that they're in the basement rocks, and I think in the past people poo-pooed finding big deposits in the basements. They thought basements were just leaking uranium off the unconformity, which is where the bulk of the historical deposits have been found. So it's very exciting to see a massive deposit like NexGen being found, and it can be mined considerably easier than that of Chemico. And I think there's substantial amount of exploration potential, not only on NexGen's ground in the western part of the basin, but also in some of the neighboring properties. And over the next few decades, it'll be very exciting to see what they're able to find there and how that impacts Canada's production of uranium, because it's a very, very exciting time, I think, over the next few decades in the Athabasca Basin, especially given that the whole western end of it is opened up now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a perfect segue into some of the company presentations that we've got lined up. Thanks so much for your time, Warren. Always a pleasure.
Deborah, thanks for having me, and have a great conference, and go Ukraine.
Thanks, Warren.
Thank you.
We have our first company presentation coming up. Tim Gabruch, CEO of IsoEnergy. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, same here, Deborah. Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope I said your last name correctly. I believe this is the first time we've actually met.
Yeah, close enough. Close enough. Well, it's no problem.
But yeah, thanks for joining us. If you want to load up your presentation, we have hosted ISO before when Craig Perry was CEO, and I believe you stepped in, was it about a year ago?
Yeah, that's right. Just over a year, February of last year. That's right.
And you came from Chemico, is that correct?
I spent a lot of time at Chemico. I was there for over 20 years. I came from actually Denison. I spent a couple of years at Denison working with the team there as they got things going on Wheeler, and also as a chief commercial officer at UPC before Uranium Participation Corp sold that asset over to Sprott, which has become kind of an interesting industry story.
Well, interesting. Yeah, love to hear that. Would love to hear about IsoEnergy if you want to walk us through the story.
I will. Yeah. So can you see that presentation okay?
Yeah, it's loaded perfectly.
Good. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, thanks first of all, for the invitation, from Adelaide. We appreciate it. And usually we're very happy to do these things. We're even more happy to do it today because you guys are obviously presenting this for a very good cause, for getting some funds together to help folks in Ukraine, which obviously is incredibly important today. So yeah, we're thrilled to be able to help out. Yeah, I'm just going to get into IsoEnergy, and certainly there's forward-looking statements. So as usual, please just look to our to all of our information on our website to take a look at that information before you make any decisions regarding ISO. But Warren talked about it very well, and he's obviously passionate about the industry, as I think all of us that will be presenting today are. And I won't spend too much time on this. I know it's supposed to be about ISO, but it's really important to kind of get a sense of the market, given the environment that ISO and NexGen and Skyharbour are operating in. And like I said, Warren did a great job. Really all I'll add to that is for us, as Warren alluded to, it's really about the supply demand fundamentals. And today, following 10 years of kind of a down market following Fukushima, we've got supply and demand fundamentals that are probably better than they've ever been on the uranium sector. And so that's what we really kind of we look to when we're doing our planning and we're looking ahead. There's over 2 billion pounds of uranium still needed to be contracted by utilities between today and 2040, which is not that far out in time. So lots of uncontracted today, given the environment we've been in over the last 10 years. Certainly, the shift in geopolitical dynamics is causing huge changes, substantial changes, material changes across the uranium industry and the nuclear industry in general. So you've got these supply-demand fundamentals that are really backing a strong market going forward, but you've got a lot of things that are kind of accelerating some of the activities in the market and the decisions in the market, including, last year it was all about Sprott and bringing in the changing, the way they operate that fund and purchasing a lot of material, which has had a big impact on the market. This year, we started seeing some civil unrest in Kazakhstan. Never thought that, after that kind of was managed, quite quickly in a very positive way, that something like Russia, would emerge with the situation that we have in Ukraine, and really that is going to have, it's already had a big impact on the market in the prices and just what's going on in the supply side, but it's going to have an impact far out in time, regardless of what happens going forward. It's Russia continues to be a major supplier to the West, including upwards of 20% of the nuclear fuel in the U.S. The U.S. market comes from Russia. So there's going to be a lot of changes. Some have already occurred, but there's more changes coming forward. And as Warren talked about in his presentation, starting to look more and more at geopolitically stable jurisdictions like Canada and Australia. In the U.S. is going to become more and more important than it's been in the past. So lots of things happening on the supply side over the last few years with the shutdowns but now some of that production starting to come back online. And again, I won't get into that in detail, but I think the other piece just to mention is notwithstanding that the market today looks better, it's also the environment around nuclear and just the narrative that people around the planet are really starting to adopt. I think for years we talked about climate change and it sounded good, but it seems like people are getting in, being very serious about it. And as a result, they're having to become more serious about nuclear, because I think as you get serious about this discussion, and again, as Warren talked about, you can't help but see that nuclear presents a huge part of the solution to the climate change challenge. So, that's just to kind of set the stage for the environment we're working in, which is, of course, an exciting one today. And IsoEnergy, is in a great position and positioned well as we kind of go forward out in time. We've only been around since 2016, so we're closely tied to NexGen, as many involved in the sector know. But those that don't, we were spun out of NexGen in 2016. They put 5 of their Eastern Athabasca properties into the company and clearly had a strategy at what today probably was the absolute down point in the market. So if you look back 2016, since then, there's been some positive changes, but 2016 was a pretty dreary time in uranium, and NexGen had the forethought to create a company, put some good properties into it at a time when there was nothing else happening. And what that did was create an environment where we also had an ability to go pick up additional properties, good properties that had been worked in the past, but really, people had stepped away from the sector. There was no capital, and so today we have 24 high quality projects, all in the Eastern Athabasca Basin. We've got a very strong technical team, obviously, given our success with Hurricane, which I'll get into, but really just a good strategic view to pick up those assets at low acquisition costs. It's really, corporate development 101. Do it when the market's low, and it's sometimes easier said than done. It's tough to make those decisions at certain times in the market, but they were able to do it, and we're benefiting from that today, and we look to be benefiting from that, down the road. So the company itself, like I said, we staked lots of properties, all in the eastern side of the basin. The strategy was really, NexGen's got the arrow in the west. We're going to stick to sort of the eastern side, and the benefits of the eastern side, of course, are that there's lots of infrastructure. This is where all the projects have been developed over the years, and the McArthur's, the Cigars, and older projects, the Rabbit Lakes. There's roads, there's power infrastructure. So if you can find good deposits or good projects and in that side of the basin, it's a real benefit to be working there. So we started drilling, on assets that hadn't been adequately drilled. We picked up a lot of great properties, and the best, addition after being set up by NexGen was to come up with our Larocque East property, which is now home to the hurricane zone. We've got many other properties in the portfolio that we're very excited about. We focused a lot on Larocque over the last few years, so we haven't spent a lot of time on some of these others, but we'll certainly plan to do that, and I'll get into a little bit of that today as well. Just to focus, on hurricane, because it is our core flagship asset. We bought this property that you see on the screen is the Larocque East property. We bought it from Cameco back in 2018. Again, sort of bottom of the market. Very quickly, we discovered mineralization where you see the star, the red star on the screen. If you can see my cursor, that's the hurricane deposit right on the border of the project there. We had a great result at the end of the 2018 drill season. And really after 2018, as a result of that, we spent the last few years focusing on the Larocque East and what's become the hurricane zone deposit. Did a lot of drilling summer of 2020 that really took the project to the next level. And you see some of the assays below on this list. We stopped drilling in the winter of 2020 because of COVID, but we've been very active since last summer. Last summer, drilled another 30 holes up there and have just finished up a winter program as well that we just released initial results on. So it's been a great deposit. We're getting, we've had great results. We're getting a very good view of what this is. We're learning about it every time we drill. It's very strategic in a lot of ways. It's quite shallow, given where it is in the Athabasca Basin, 325 meters. That's well within, economic depths, given where other projects have been in the past, and it's also very close to Orano's McLean Lake Mill, which is, a huge strategic advantage to be anywhere near an existing mill in this part of the world. Just one, quick schematic here on where it sits in the basin, just to give you kind of a comparison around the depth compared to other projects. So, we're shallower than the McArthur's and Cigars, right around the same depth as Phoenix that Denison's developing. And so, really in that sweet spot, it's an unconformity hosted deposit. So that, the bulk of the deposit sits in the unconsolidated sandstone on top of the basement rock, which is similar to, to Wheeler River, Phoenix, McArthur Cigar in that kind of makeup. With respect to, exploration, the work we've been doing, like I said, we've been following up on this project in a big way for the last couple of years. In summer, we drilled over 16,000 meters at Larocque East and on our Geiger property, which is the first time we went back to another property outside of Larocque East. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a couple slides. But we did that. We also completed lots of geophysics on Larocque East out to the far eastern side of the deposit that we hadn't drilled in the past in order to get some good targets for future drill programs, which we've taken advantage of this past winter. We also did some geophysics, airborne geophysics on the Collins Bay extension, the property you see out to the right, which is also something that we're excited about as a property down the road. It's on trend from Eagle Point and Collins Bay past existing mines. And so we like the looks of that and developing plans for that down the road. This winter program, we did another almost 12,000, planned for 11,900. We did just over 12,000 meters of drilling on the Larocque East, only 2,400 meters following up on mineralization on Hurricane that we came up with last summer. The majority of the exploration was actually along that conductive trend out to the east. So utilizing that geophysical work that we conducted back in the summer of 2021, identified some great targets and did a lot of work there. We also followed up some drilling last summer at Geiger by some additional geophysics to identify new targets and also did some geophysics at our Ranger and Hawk projects. We've got a couple of core sample photos here, and it's really just to give you a sense of what we have here. And Warren talked about the quality of the deposits in northern Saskatchewan, and here you have chemical assays that are in excess of 70% for some of this. So the top box is the best result we've had to date, 3.5 meters at 74%, and it's just it just shows you like what does that look like? Well, it's pure black pitch blende. It's it's almost pure uranium, and this is on par with other great deposits you've seen in the past in the Athabasca Basin. Last summer we had a great hit, 6.5 meters at over 20%, 3.5 meters at 34.5%, and that's the very black core sample that you see in the middle of that picture as well. So just some great results, and continue to drill there and define the project and come up with a great view of exactly what it is that we have at Hurricane, which we're very fortunate to have. This is a drawing, just the most recent drawing of just what does the deposit look like from a grade perspective. You see the darker red or orange to the left, and that really is the sweet spot of the deposit. We've been drilling, seeing that it extends out to the east for quite a distance, for a kilometer or so. But we started to put some of the ring fence around this, to the north and to the east, especially last summer when we were drilling. We had some good results down in this hole 101, LE21 101 last summer. So we did some follow up this winter. This is, we don't have a full assay yet, but the radioactivity from LE22 115 was a good result. So we continue to build a little bit on the deposit. Like I said, the sweet spot's sort of over here on the border, and that's the border of the Dawn Lake project with Cameco and Orano. That's their project. We do know that they, over the last year or so, they've started to look at this, given the results, I think, on our side, but they've done some geophysics. They were doing some drilling on the other side. So it's become an active area, and there's obviously a very good story developing with respect to what does the Hurricane deposit become out in the future. So just look at where we've done some geophysics, some of the resistivity work that we've done on the project, and you can see the Hurricane deposit way out to the west here. It's a small piece of the property. There's 15 kilometers of conductor along the eastern side of this property. And so it's, in these A, B, and C zones that have been circled that we started to do more exploration, conducting a lot of that this past winter. So, we're looking ahead to, what else is on the Rock East. We'll have assays out for the winter drilling shortly, but the initial radioactivity has been posted. Geiger, I mentioned a couple of times. So last summer when we did some drilling on Geiger, was the first time ISO had done any drilling outside of the Rock East since we initially found Hurricane. And that's just because that's been the main focus, and it'll continue to be our focus going forward. But we want to free up additional resources because really we started without the Rock East when the company was formed, and we had great projects that we wanted to explore, and we still hold those projects. And so we wanted to turn some attention to, what's the next stage in the ISO story? Which properties do we want to spend time and resources on? And Geiger's one of those that we like a lot. We did some drilling last summer, got some good structural information, and found some new alterations in that deposit, did some geophysics now this winter in order to kind of lead us to a position this coming summer where we can do some additional work. So we'll continue to do work on Geiger and are looking forward to that for this summer. The other projects, just Hawk and Ranger, a couple of other projects we haven't done a lot of work on lately. So we did some geophysics to really establish some targets for future drilling as well. Ranger's down kind of in that sweet spot between, McArthur and Cigar in the southern part of the basin on the western side, eastern side. And Hawk is more up to the north, near to where our existing Hurricane deposit is. As far as corporately, probably running out of time here, but we continue to have benefited greatly from not only finding the Hurricane deposit, but also where the market's gone over the last 6 months to a year, and obviously we're very positive on where it's heading longer term. We continue to have a good cash position. We're sitting on still about $9 million in cash. We haven't raised in some time. We've had enough to keep us going, and really could keep us going through our program for the rest of the year. And the nice thing about this market is there is interest in investors providing capital. There's capital available there. And so, we will at the right time take advantage of that to continue to drive forward with the work that we want to do on some, not only the Rockies and Hurricane, but also on some of our other projects. As far as the management team, as Deborah mentioned, I joined the company back in February of last year. It's been a great year of getting back to work in the field and some changes. We just hired a new chief financial officer, Graham DePries. He's come on full time. He was most recently with Hart Gold, but he has experience in uranium back with Uranium One several years ago. And so him and his family are moving from Toronto to Saskatoon, which is where we have now headquartered the company since I came on in February, really just recognizing that, our projects are here in Saskatchewan, and I'm a Saskatchewan guy, born and bred. So we wanted to be close to our projects, to the communities we're working with. And so very happy that Graham has come on to support that. Andy Carmichael has taken over as Vice President of Exploration. Andy's been with the company since the beginning and critical in the discovery of Hurricane. And he's just done a great job putting together a great team. We've added resources on the corporate secretary side. Elizabeth's a lawyer here in Saskatoon, and Dave Thomas is a 40-year vet of mining and geology, and not just in uranium, but in other commodities. But Dave is basically recognized as one of the foremost authorities on uranium geology, and not just in Saskatchewan, but globally. So we're happy, thrilled really to have him on as a dedicated consultant on uranium. I also mentioned, we came out of NexGen, but we continue to really enjoy the support of NexGen in a big way. They continue to be just over a 50% owner of ISO. Our chairman is Lee Currier, the CEO of NexGen, and we benefit from Trevor, Richard, and Chris here that are also directors of NexGen, and obviously have the experience of just taking NexGen through the ride that it's had and drawing on that experience and applying it to IsoEnergy. So very, very happy to have that support, not just financially, but just, in every aspect of managing and operating the company. Deborah, that's really about it. I mean, as far as highlights, I mean, we are really the only high grade discovery that's been made in uranium globally over the last number of years. So it really puts us in a kind of a unique position. We've got a great team, not just on the geology side, but now financially and in governance, and with complete support of NexGen. And Warren mentioned it, but yeah, geopolitically, it's always been important to be located in a place like Saskatchewan. But I think today, given everything that's happening in the world, it's going to become even more importantly. And he was right. Fraser Institute just came out with their new mining rankings, and Saskatchewan is number one in Canada for mining jurisdictions, and number two in the world, second only to Western Australia. So, we're really well positioned with a great discovery that we've made in the last few years in a market that we believe is strengthening and really fundamentally changing in a very, very positive way with respect to supporting nuclear globally. So that's really where I'll end it for now, Deborah, unless there's some questions, but really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Tim. I think we're saving the questions for the panel chat at the end.
Perfect.
But yeah, thank you for the overview, and we'll see you in about, 45 minutes.
Sounds good.
I seem to be having trouble moving Jordan into the panel. Zoom's just not letting me.
Can you hear me? Is that working?
Yeah, sorry about that, Jordan. I'm going to have to look into what Zoom's changed that they don't let us do that anymore, but you'd think 2 years into this, I could figure it out.
Yeah, it happens. We'll be able to do these in person soon enough.
Yeah, well, I saw you recently, which was nice.
That's right. Yeah, it was good to see you down at the conference there, and got quite a few coming up. So yeah, looking forward to doing this in person. Let me just get my screen.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do an intro while you load up your presentation. So for the audience, next presenting is Jordan Trimble, who's CEO of Skyharbour Resources, who has a pretty large portfolio of uranium assets, many of which are in the Athabasca Basin, along with our other presenters. They have a bit of a hybrid model, being both an explorer and developer and a prospect generator. Jordan, did I butcher the intro?
No, you've done a great job. So Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Skyharbour portion of the presentation. Tim, great presentation. Lauren, wish you were here. Great presentation. Hard to follow up on. Looking forward to the panel. And Deb, thanks for putting this on. It's for a great cause. I certainly think it's topical right now too for investors to really look at jurisdiction and security of supply. Obviously, the three companies here being Athabasca Basin centric uranium companies. So without further ado, I'll work my way through the presentation. I'm sure a number of people watching or tuning in know the story. One thing I do want to highlight is this year for Skyharbour is going to be a very pivotal year. So for those of you that do follow closely, you'll see we've had a fair bit of news flow. And a big part of that is these partner companies, as Deb pointed out, this hybrid model as a quasi prospect generator. But I do want to emphasize that we've got our flagship Moore Lake project that we're advancing. We're just wrapping up a winter drill program there. We have a multi-phase program and drilling planned at that project for the remainder of the year. We're making serious progress there, in particular in these underlying basement rocks and some notable high-grade recent holes that we've announced over the last year to 18 months. This year will be the busiest. It'll be the most catalyst rich. I think the number right now for us is about 15,000 meters of drilling that's either currently underway or has been completed by us and our partner companies. Assays pending. We're pretty excited with what we've been seeing, what the partner companies have been seeing, some of these other projects. So we have multiple irons in the fire and plans to go and work, continue working, as I mentioned, our flagship Moore Lake project, but also the partners funding these other properties. Just as a recap, overview for the company. So we are a high-grade exploration story. Really our main objective and the main value proposition for shareholders is high-grade discovery in the basin. We're at the earlier parts of that relative to our counterparts here. We're a smaller cap name, but we're well on our way, I believe, to making additional discoveries in the Athabasca Basin, whether it's at one of our core projects, at our flagship Moore Lake project, or at one of our partner-funded projects. So the 14 projects range from earlier stage exploration right through to more advanced stage exploration. Two of them do host resources. One of them, our flagship, as you'll get into the presentation, we're actively advancing right now. We're working towards a maiden resource estimate, updated resource estimate there. Our South Falcon Point project, we own 100% of. There's an inferred resource there. And then the other projects are a bit earlier stage. And as Deb pointed out, we have a dual-pronged strategy. So again, high-grade exploration discovery at our core projects coupled with prospect generation. I will just note we've been around for a while. I think that's important right now. There's new companies coming into the basin, coming into the fold. We've been here since 2013. We've been very opportunistic and accretive in building this asset portfolio. We just added a number of properties back in December as well that offer exposure to other parts of the basin and also provide more inventory for us with potentially new partner companies. So there's lots to talk about. I'll get right into it. Forward-looking statements, let people read this on their own time. Investment highlights. So people, timing, and projects. These are really the three core pillars of Skyharbour. People being the technical team with focused expertise in the Athabasca Basin in making these high-grade discoveries in the basin. The management team, we have lots of years of experience. We've just added to the team recently and over the last few years. There's a good mix of technical geological expertise on that management team, as well as corporate and capital markets experience. Also, I like to highlight our strategic partners and our long-term loyal and larger shareholders, which I'll talk a bit more about later in the presentation. Timing. So timing with the uranium market. Warren did a great job with that here, so I won't get into it too much. There's a few slides that cover it off, and I'll make a few talking points, but I really do believe we're in the early innings of what is a sustainable bull market for uranium going forward. I think we're going to see several years of price moves higher and higher. One quick note on the market is we're seeing a bit of a pullback. We've seen this over the course of the last 18 months. I think it provides great entry points for investors going forward. I think there's still a lot of runway ahead of us. And then last but not least, projects. 14 projects, as I mentioned, scattered throughout the Athabasca Basin. One of the larger land packages, we're now at about over 385,000 hectares. Dual-pronged strategy. We're advancing several of these projects, and or partner companies are. And so there's a lot of optionality and there's good potential for additional discoveries and resource delineation at these projects. So we believe there's a lot more value to be unlocked at this asset base over the coming years. Just moving on. So starting with the people. So management team and board. I'm sure most of you are familiar with us. I started running the company in 2013, coming from an entrepreneurial and finance background. My chairman, Jim Pettit, and I sold a company called Bayfield Ventures prior to this, and him and I have worked together for about a dozen years. Jim's been in the industry now for over 35 years. He's the chairman of the board. Dave Cates is a director, very important key member of the board. He's the president and CEO of Denison Mines. Most of you, I'm sure, familiar with Denison. We have a very close working relationship and strategic partnership with Dave and his team. They're one of our largest corporate shareholders and strategic shareholders. And Dave personally is quite a large shareholder of the company as well. More recently, we added some more capital markets bench strength with Joe Gallucci. So Joe is now the head of investment banking at Laurentian Bank. He's worked with a handful of uranium companies throughout his tenure. He knows the space very well, and again, brings us that extra strength when it comes to capital markets. So happy to have him join as a director a few years ago. Dave Bayard, Christine McKechnie, and Dylan Drummond. So these are our geologists, Dave being our senior geologist. Dave's worked in the basin for over 40 years now. He was a 12-year senior geo at Cameco before starting building and ultimately selling his own uranium company, JNR, with his partner, Rick. So Dave's been around. He's worked extensively on a few of the projects that we have in our portfolio, and really is a crucial part to advancing these projects, and again, has very much focused expertise in uranium exploration in the basin. Christine joined us about 6.5, 7 years ago. She's now our senior project geologist. Christine, again, cut her teeth at Cameco. She's worked with several uranium companies in the basin. And she actually wrote her award-winning thesis at the University of Saskatchewan on one of our deposits, the Fraser Lakes Zone B deposit, our South Falcon Point project. A very strong technical team. Just a few others to round out the board and advisory board. Paul Matizik joined as an advisor several years ago, really needs no introduction. He's built and sold a handful of mining companies, including his Energy Metals, which he sold for $1.8 billion in 2007 to Uranium One. And then just recently, we announced the addition of a new officer, Senior Vice President of Corporate Development, Andrew Ramcharan, based out of Toronto. Andrew's a 20-year veteran in the industry. He was the Corp Dev Manager for IAMGOLD. And prior to that, he was at SRK, where he worked with a handful of uranium companies, including Uranium One, IsoEnergy, and Urwin, which was ultimately sold to Areva at the time for $2.5 billion. So moving on, so the capital structure, 133 million shares issued and outstanding, market cap ranging. It's been fluctuating. We've obviously seen some volatility in the market, trading around a $70 to $75 million market cap, share price in the low to mid 50s here Canadian, well funded with just under 8 million in the treasury. We'll note that covers us for our exploration plans at our Moore Lake project and South Falcon Point for the remainder of this year, while we have partner companies funding the bulk of the exploration at our several of our other projects. Within that too, though, we do have equity holdings in some of these partner companies. And this is, again, one of the benefits of this prospect generator business that we've been building is we do offer exposure to some of these partner companies, not just through a minority interest ultimately in the project, but also through equity holdings in these companies. Notable and strategic shareholders, so management and insiders, we have a lot of skin in the game. I've been pretty actively purchasing shares through private placements and in the open market over the last several years. Denison Mines, as I mentioned, our largest corporate shareholder. You'll see several notable institutional investors as well, rounding out the list, and then both of the uranium mining ETFs just recently being included into the URA. So we have a few slides here. As I mentioned, I won't spend a lot of time on this, want to work our way into the projects, but just a quick note on the industry. So, nuclear industry, really like to think of it as being at the nexus of two major mega trends globally right now. One being electrification. The world needs more electricity, and going hand in hand with that is clean energy. It is the only source of baseload, scalable, affordable electricity that's emissions free. And as Warren pointed out, it's going to play an integral role in the energy mix going forward. We have a couple notes here on SMRs as talked about earlier. But moving on to the uranium market itself. So we see here, it really is, and I think this gets overshadowed by the supply side a little bit, but this still really is a growth story. You'll see there with the need for more clean electricity. Nuclear is going to continue to grow, and the demand for uranium is going to continue to grow. Over 440 operable reactors, over 50 reactors under construction, and many hundreds more ordered, planned, or proposed. We've talked about the supply deficit. You'll see here, UxC estimates cumulative supply gap by 2029 of approximately 340 million pounds. We burn through a lot of these secondary inventories as the demand for this commodity and this metal continues to grow, and we just haven't seen that new abundance of supply come on to meet that growing demand. The big, I'd say, talking point more recently with this as well is uncovered demand and this new contracting cycle. We've seen over the last several months and announced by Cameco some pretty significant contracting over the course of the last 12 to 18 months. And really think, again, we're at the early stages of this new procurement cycle, which historically has been one of the biggest drivers for this metal price. And I think in this cycle, we're, again, still in the early days of that, but that's where I think we'll see a big boon for the uranium price going forward. Just to go through globally what's happening, as I'm sure a lot of people know, China's really at the forefront of the growth here with 150 new reactors planned over the next 15 years. That's more reactors coming on in China than has come on in the last 35 years globally. We talked a little bit about geopolitical tensions and conflict globally. Obviously, there's major implications, as Russia is a big player in this industry, and I really don't think we've seen the full ramifications of that. It's certainly positive being a North American or Australian uranium company, and as pointed out, the Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan really is the best place in the world to be looking for developing and mining these deposits. I'll move on here to this slide is before we quickly get into the projects, and this is pertinent for this because we've seen over the last 10 years the kind of wealth and return potential, wealth creation return potential that these high-grade uranium discoveries have created in the Athabasca Basin. Now, I will note, a number of these discoveries have been made in declining uranium price environments. And so as we work our way into this bull market, it'll be interesting to see if we can uncover new high-grade deposits or delineate these high-grade resources in the basin, what kind of return potential we're going to see. There are some new techniques and exploration methodologies that are being employed. We're certainly at the forefront of that, and that's really brought the discovery price and cost down for these high-grade uranium discoveries in the basin. So finishing off here with the project portfolio, this is an updated map of our projects in the Athabasca Basin, and you'll see here 14 properties, 385,000 hectares, so just under 1 million acres of projects, again, scattered throughout the basin. You'll see we've now got exposure not just to the north side or to the south side, but to the north side as well. Most of the projects, including our flagship Moore Lake project, are on the infrastructure-rich east side, the Athabasca Basin. You'll see Moore Lake here, about 15 kilometers east of Denison's Wheeler project. You've got the road, the haulage road up to MacArthur, just west of the project, and Key Lake just southwest. South Falcon Point also I want to draw people's attention to. So South Falcon Point, we own 100% of it. It does have an NI 43-101 inferred resource. We are planning programs there this year, coupled with our ongoing exploration at our Moore Lake project. So just because I know we have limited time here, I'll work my way through the projects as quickly as I can here. So Moore Lake we acquired in 2016. This is a high-grade advanced stage exploration project that we acquired in 2016, started working on it in 2017. You'll see it's had a lot of historical exploration, some notable high-grade drill results. And I think this is a big differentiating feature for Skyharbour at our current market cap relative to other companies that are smaller cap that are operating in the basin. Is you'll see some of these very high-grade drill results. Now, what's exciting about this project is when we acquired it, most of that historical work had been focused on shallow drilling in the sandstone or down to the unconformity. So the basement rock and a lot of regional targets were relatively untested. Now, not to take away from what we found or what historically has been found in the sandstone, you'll see here when we went back in 2017, some of our first drill holes, we encountered some of the highest grade mineralization, 21% over 1.5 meters within 6 meters of 6%. Again, sandstone hosted. We don't want to take away from this because as we're seeing with some of these new mining methods in the basin that are being proposed, ISR and Sabre, these shallower sandstone hosted deposits could be quite interesting. But more recently, what we've been focused on is the basement rocks. And with the help of some new geophysical techniques, some new geological modeling, just in the last year, we've been able to target some higher grade zones, new discoveries in the underlying basement rocks at this 5 kilometer long Maverick corridor. In particular, a new zone that we discovered called the Maverick East Zone. And you'll see in the results from 2021, our best and highest grade drill results from these underlying basement hosted zones, 6.8% over 2 meters. And we're also seeing some very long intersections, 15 to 20 meters of 0.5% to 1% in these basement rocks. So relatively untested. We feel like we're onto a much larger zone or deposit of uranium in these underlying basement rocks. But we also have about a dozen other targets, high priority regional targets at the project that we're going to be doing a little bit of work on as we continue to advance this project going forward. I mentioned South Falcon Point, again, on the southwest or southeast side of the basin. We have a small inferred resource there, certainly getting more interesting given it's right at surface and we have a higher uranium price. We are planning a small program there. We'll have news out on that forthcoming. And then just wrapping up, the prospect generator business, as I mentioned, this has become a bigger part of the Skyharbour story. You'll see here, total exploration expenditures, cash payments, share issuances from our now 5 partner companies, one of which is a joint venture partner in industry leader Orano at our Preston project. Azincourt, we now have a joint venture partnership with at our East Preston project. They've just wrapped up 5,000 meters, some very interesting looking mineralization and radioactivity in some of the drill core there, assays pending for all of those holes. And then more recently, our 3 newer option partners in Basin Uranium Corp, Valor Resources, and Madero Mining. So you'll see the money being spent, pretty significant amount of exploration to the tune of almost $20 million being funded by partner companies. Most of these companies still in the early days or early years of these earn-in agreements, potentially over $10 million in cash payments. And last but not least, the share issuances. So we continue to receive shares and equity in these partner companies as they earn in on these projects. As I mentioned, I'll just wrap up here. As I mentioned, East Preston, 5,000 meters by Azincourt, assays pending. Hook Lake, our partner Valor, just completed just under 2,000 meters, assays pending on that drill program. And at our Man Lake project, Basin Uranium Corp has just commenced a 6,000 meter drill program there. So again, like I said earlier, this is going to be our busiest year. It's going to be full of catalysts and news flow, lots of drilling, lots of potential for discovery. Just wrapping up with the recent milestones and upcoming catalysts. So, biggest one remains continued drilling and exploration at our more advanced stage projects, including our flagship Moore Lake project. We continue to intersect high-grade mineralization, working towards an updated resource estimate. We'll have a multi-phase drill program fully funded this year at Moore. Exploration and drilling funded by partner companies, as I just went through. Look for us to form additional option agreements and JV partnerships with new companies coming into the basin. There is money out there, as we've seen over the last year and a half, and we do have a lot of inventory. New project acquisitions, we are in an acquisitive mode right now. keep an eye out for news flow on that. And last but not least, uranium market recovery. Again, still, I think in the very much the early innings. As a smaller cap company, we do offer leverage to that rising uranium price, as well as the exploration and discovery potential at our project base. So I'll hand it over. Went a little bit over time there, but I'll hand it back over to you, Deb. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jordan. Really appreciate the overview. I see that there are some questions there, but we'll get to those in about 20 minutes after our next company presents. So yeah, thanks, Jordan. I'll keep you around for the panel. So next up, we have NexGen Energy. Travis McPherson's going to present.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Travis. Yep, nice to see you. We also saw each other recently at the BMO conference.
That's right, we did, yeah.
But yeah, great to have you present again. I think you've done a couple sessions with us in the past, but maybe you can give us a bit of an overview of what NexGen Energy is. And I believe that you're getting pretty close to finishing your permitting, so maybe we can get an update there.
Sure, yeah. I'll skip all the uranium. I'm sure everyone on this call is aware of what's going on, but demand's way outpacing supply, and that's going to persist for a long time. Look, Arrow, what we're developing, we own 100% of it. We discovered it. Grassroots exploration led to the discovery back in early 2014. Long period of time from 2014 really to where we sit today of, as you have to do, a lot of drilling, defining, refining, growing a resource, understanding more about it, doing all the studies around metallurgy, geotechnical, hydrogeological, everything, stakeholder engagement all through the period. And then culminating kind of where we are today, which is, entering the project execution phase and actually delivering the project to those future uranium needs and trying to help anyways, doing our part to try to balance the market, even though one arrow isn't going to get us there. Arrow is, tier one probably gets thrown around in the mining sector a lot. This truly is a tier one, a strategic tier one. It's like a one of one, frankly. It's at the lowest end of the cost curve, long life. We're permitting for 24 years. It's environmentally elite. What do we mean by that? It's a tiny little mine because the grades are very high. It's all contained within competent basement rock. So it's very clean metallurgy, very safe for humans to work in underground, and a very small physical footprint. And so all the benefits of that, meaning low carbon intensity, low water consumption, air quality, noise, everything related to that is all very, very much minimized. And then it's all, in the heart of Saskatchewan, which is consistently ranked the world's best mining jurisdiction in Canada. And frankly, I don't know how good I just saw they got ranked second best in the world. I don't know how the number one could be better than Saskatchewan. Frankly, it's a real privilege to work there. So it's a very exciting project. It's going to be the world's largest, lowest cost uranium mine. And we're going through, as I said, this project execution phase. Now, like Tim and Jord, having projects and developing projects like these being controlled by commercial public companies, diversified commercial public companies like, ISO, Skyharbour, and ourselves, this is something that the world really, really needs, because right now, over 71% of uranium production is from state-owned or quasi-controlled companies. That's not a bad, having those players be in the market is not necessarily a bad thing or anything. It's just the risk profile changes with that when geopolitics comes into play, and you're not just dealing with uranium, but you're dealing with, geopolitical events, as we're all well aware of. Arrow and our Rook I project, producing, close to 30 million pounds a year is going to have a huge impact on re-diversifying global uranium supply chains, and something that I think the world should and will welcome with open arms. In terms of what we're talking about, in terms of the specifics of these economics and why it's such a, strategic tier one type asset, well, at spot pricing today, you're talking about a $4.5 billion after-tax NPV, an IRR similar to, an oil well, not really a mine in terms of like 60% IRR. And then, it's going to cost us $1.3 billion to put it into production. Might sound like a big number, but it pays itself back in about 9 months. So it's just really, really a freak of a deposit and a project. And it's really driven from the fact, again, that it's contained in the basement rock, yet it's very, very high grade. So mining and processing, all very conventional, all very environmentally elite. And then you have grades that really create these gigantic margins that you see. Cash flows and EBITDA, you're talking about well in excess of $1 billion annually. You know, when you look at the top 10 global mining companies, that really elevates us into that top 10 global mining category by that metric of annualized free cash flow. So, you know, where we sit today relative to where we're going to be in the not too distant future is a very big gap. And we're very excited to deliver going into that. This just gives you a sense of how robust the project economics are. You know, I should mention actually before I go on that all of these numbers, as good as they are represented by an 11-year feasibility study mine life, which is based on NI 43-101 compliance on the measured and indicated category of resources. We are permitting the project, and we'll touch on where we sit with that in a moment, but we are permitting the project for 24 years of operating life. So lots of life ahead of it for sure. These numbers, again, are all based on that kind of 11-year phase one of the project from the feasibility study. But as you can see, I mean, you know, you start getting into like, so spot prices, call it 60, we're dropped a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but call it 60. You know, that's where these numbers sit. When you start going up into more incentive pricing ranges, you know, the numbers start to get quite large quite quickly. And that's, again, driven by the margins of the project. And it's very, very exciting. We'll skip that one in the interest of time. This one, I'm sure everyone's seen. We've had this slide for a very long time, but this really is what drives this cartoon. Really is the driver of the value of Arrow, because, you know, the projects historically, both ones that have been mined out, ones that are currently being mined, and the majority of projects that are in development are associated with the unconformity, which is the contact point between this Athabasca sandstone geological unit and this granite basement rock. That's where it's all been in the past. And you know, it's been mined successfully in the past and everything. Arrow is really the first of its kind where it's as large and high grade as the projects you've seen in the Eastern Athabasca Basin and at that unconformity. But we don't have geotechnical and hydrogeological characteristics to deal with in that way. So again, that's a key differentiator, key driver of why those economics are the way they are. It's not to say this is the only way it has to be done at all. Again, these have been successfully mined either out or are currently being mined or, you know, have very strong plans to mine in the future. All I'm saying is that this is a huge benefit for us and really what drives those economics, because a lot of people look at those and think, well, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because of this setting. Again, that drives conventional, everything's conventional, which is, again, a huge differentiator. Historically, in Canadian uranium, you've had grade, you've had volume, but you've had some challenging geotechnical and underground settings to figure out, and they have figured them out in a lot of cases. But it's not conventional. It's not as predictable. It's not as low risk technically. With ours, you know, it will be very much conventional, both in terms of mining and processing. Arrow, you know, what we showed you there is, as I said, just an absolute freak of a project, but we don't even know what Arrow is yet in total. Like, we have an extremely good and strong handle on what's in the feasibility study, obviously, and that environmental assessment case of 24 years, but we don't know beyond that. The deposit's open really everywhere. And on top of that, so when you kind of like look at that and then you start stepping out, it gets even more unknown in terms of the true potential or testing the potential. We know the potential is there, but testing it. As you can see, this is Arrow here. This is one of the corridors. These are these large regional, you know, effectively like cracks in the ground where the fluids flow. And when you're looking for dams and traps that can slow the fluid flow down and precipitate large concentrations of high-grade uranium. Obviously, these stars represent discoveries we've made. This is Fission's RRR project as well along that same corridor. But as you can see, I mean, there's stars everywhere. There's high-grade uranium all over this. again, we don't know the full extent of Arrow, let alone the full extent of this or this or this or this or this. And then when you start stepping out to all these other corridors, which are equally prospective, we know less and less about those. So we're very confident that in the fullness of time, this jurisdiction, of which we control a very strong portfolio of land. This is one of the portfolios. We have another package of land right up here called SW1. This is called SW2 here. And then we have SW3 down here. Combined, it's about 200,000 hectares of land, all equally prospective. We believe that in the fullness of time, once we actually get to drilling more of these, in the decades to come, that it will go down as one of the most well-endowed mineral belts of any commodity in the world. And so we're exploring continuously. We started back with regional exploration last year, got some great results. We're following those up this year with a plan to be announced and coming. But again, we're not looking to expand Arrow. We're looking for other arrows in other areas. That's really the focus. Sustainability, it's been a key pillar of us, of our company, our culture for since the beginning. Before, frankly, it was called ESG. I think it was called CSR, and just being good neighbors really is our approach to it. And so we've been doing that for a very long time. Needless to say, key focus of ours, something everyone in the company, it's not even a request, it's a requirement that you're passionate about it and sincere and genuine about your approach to it every day. But I suggest everybody go on our website, www.nexgenenergy.ca. There's a series of documentaries we made. A few of them actually won some Cannes Film Festival awards for the one on Dene language as an example. So I suggest you go on there, watch them. They're not super long, but I think it's a really excellent window on, the communities that we partner with, as well as our approach to the communities. Just in terms of what's ahead of us. So on the project development side, we're completing what's called front-end engineering design, FEED. That's bringing, the feasibility study up in terms of its engineering percentages. So we're doing that. That's going to complete by the end of the year. The engineering component of that will complete, in midsummer. That will kick off detailed engineering starting there after. We're also looking to potentially do some site works at site, some things related to safety, things like an airstrip, some upgrades to some access roads, advancing the camps, and some other things associated with that. We're looking to potentially start that this year as well. And then on the permitting side, we're also exploring, as I said, we're going to continue exploring with 2 or 3 rigs through really, into infinity effectively. We're just going to keep doing that, looking for more arrows. But on the permitting front, we're at a really exciting stage because next week we're going to submit our environmental impact statement. Now that statement is the culmination of 9 years worth of work and data collection, and really, characterizes how this project is, wildly beneficial for everyone and not impactful to the environment. So we're very, very excited to lodge that and get to that next milestone. And then that sets off a series of kind of like statutory timelines and approval processes, culminating in a commission hearing. We don't know exactly when that will be. Obviously, it's subject to kind of the reviews, public comment period, and that. But the feedback, we've got huge support for the project from our local communities, from all of our stakeholders, effectively, regulators, everyone. This is a project that it's not a question mark around is this a go project? It's a great project on a million different fronts. Obviously, economically, socially, for the communities in the north, hugely beneficial. When you start going out from that, the impacts to GDP for the province broadly, huge. Canada, huge. We'll re-elevate Canada to the top producing country of uranium in the world, which is exciting to be able to contribute to that, along with Cameco and Orano, and hopefully, ISO, Skyharbours, Fissions, Denisons, everyone really developing this robust, sustainable Canadian uranium production to help fuel the world's future clean energy needs. And then at the macro level, delivering carbon-free baseload power. Very, very exciting. So we've got this year ahead of us, which is really the year where we go from, defining and refining into this project execution. And that's something that we're all very, very motivated to start and kick off along with all of our stakeholders and partners. In terms of the numbers, we've got about $180 million in the bank cash today. Our daily liquidity is rising every day with increased interest in uranium and nuclear. Got a fantastic shareholder registry of both long-term strategic investors in Li Ka-shing and the Chong Kong Group, as well as Queens Road Capital, Mega Uranium, and then a list of fantastic, very smart institutional investors and shareholders. So yeah, it's very, very exciting. This is kind of our analyst coverage. We've got, I think, 12 analysts covering us. The team. We've got the team to do it, both at the executive level as well as the board level. So maybe I'll stop there and open it up for any questions or whatever you want to do, Deb. Thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the presentation. I was thinking throughout it, it's 10 years since your discovery hole. Is that correct? Was it
2014, so about 8 years. Yep.
It's incredible how much has happened since then. So congratulations to you and the whole team. It's really exciting. So now we're going to open it up for a kind of a group discussion. Tim and Jordan, if you want to come back and turn your cameras on, that'd be great. I did prearrange some questions, but I see some audience questions came in, but I'm going to try and keep it thematic so that you all have a chance to contribute. I guess the first question that I had that also came up during the sessions was just on technology. Jordan, I think you mentioned some improved technologies. So other than geophysics, are there any technologies that you found especially helpful in narrowing down drill targets? And if yes, are you able to elaborate on what's worked particularly well for step out or exploration drilling? And please feel free to take a wider view and just talk about any new technologies that you're seeing in uranium exploration and development. Maybe we'll start with you, Jordan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the other guys can attest to this, but it's come a long way. Like there's been a bit of a shift in paradigm how we find these deposits over the last 20 years. And it ranges from not just the technologies being used. So for example, you talked about geophysics, like we had quite a bit of success with some drone hosted and flown geophysical surveys that we carried out in 2018, 2019 that allowed us to target these basement rock targets at our flagship project that yielded these new discoveries of these higher grade feeder zones underneath the sandstone hosted mineralization, the Maverick Zone. But the one that I think it's a little old school, but it's still very much important is just geochemical analysis. So there's been a lot more drilling, there's been a lot more work done over the last 20 years. And our ability now, whether it's through geologists or now even through like the advent of machine learning and aggregating and analyzing all of these data points, our ability to kind of prioritize targets is getting better and better. And so, for example, for us, that's what led to our Maverick East zone discovery, was going back in, looking at the historical drill holes and recognizing that, okay, yeah, there's some mineralization on these two drill fences that were quite widely spaced. We went in and we drilled right between them. And we only did that because we looked at the geochem in those drill holes and recognized that it was prospective. And that's what led to the high grade discovery at Maverick East. And so just having a better knowledge of the geochem, the indicator minerals, PIMA analysis with the clays, the types of structures and alteration you're looking for, that has provided, I think, all of us with a much better tool belt to go in and make these discoveries. And, there's countless new or not countless, but several new discoveries where I think that would be one of the key drivers for the discovery. Another one for us in particular was going back in and just not even necessarily the geochem, but looking at all the historical geological data, whether it was geophysics or whatever else it was. And this has yielded some new zones of new targets, higher priority targets at some of our projects, including Moore Lake, that we're now testing. And we've just put the first few holes into a new target called Grid 19 that we're having success with as well. So it's a combination of all these things. Obviously, the basement rocks, spending more money in these basement rocks, drilling more into these basement rocks has yielded some major discoveries, as we've discussed. So it's a confluence of factors. But bottom line is it's providing us with more to go find these new high-grade deposits and discoveries in the basin at a lower cost. You look at how they found them historically, drilling, potentially hundreds of drill holes down to 300, 400, 500, 600 meters. We can go in there now with much more at our disposal and at a much cheaper discovery cost.
That's lower cost, even accounting for inflationary costs right now?
Yeah, you know what, I'd say it is. Yeah, I mean, even, obviously there has been cost inflation, but, if we just look at the recent discoveries and the number of drill holes it took versus, historical discoveries, right? It's still very much, I think, saving on cost, making these discoveries and the resource delineation once you've made the discoveries, right? Yes, there is cost inflation, but I do think just given what we've seen over the last 20 years and how we make these discoveries, it's still to the benefit the companies and the investors in them.
Okay, great. Tim, do you have anything to add on the technology side?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Jordan did a great job, and he explained it very well. And I'm not a geologist, so I won't even try to expand on that. But yeah, I would say the only other piece, the only secret sauce that we have is it goes beyond technology, and it's the people. Just bringing on the right people, the right geologists, the right team. And I think all three of us here probably would vouch for the folks that we have on the geological side. And it's critical because you can use all the tools and have all the technology in the world, but if you have the wrong people applying it, then it doesn't mean much. So yeah, we've spent a lot of time obviously focusing on the same things Jordan's talked about, but also bringing on the right people for the job, including guys like I said, Dave Thomas, people with 40 years experience in the sector who know the projects and have seen it all before, even on an old school basis. Those guys are irreplaceable, and that's really the only piece I would maybe add to that, Deborah.
Okay, great. Thanks. Travis?
Yeah, no, I totally agreed with what Jordan and Tim were saying. For us, we've always looked at it, and it's always a fine line. Like, you don't want to get into like pure science experiments, but you do want to kind of see, because our view, like your point on inflation is very valid, but technology is a hugely deflationary impact generally, not just in mining, just in life, I think. And so if there's a more efficient way, cost efficient, time, safety, there's a lot of ways things can be more efficient. We look at them and evaluate them. And we always have, whether it was when we were delineating the deposit, we started to implement directional drilling, which was, efficient on a number of fronts. One is time and cost, but another one was actually surface disturbance and the environmental impact of drilling from surface. Therefore, you can drill 3 to 4 holes effectively into the deposit from one drill pad location. So we started to do that, hugely successful. Geophysics, absolutely. You're always layering on the newest, latest, and greatest surface geophysics to try to, it's just it's art. You're just layering on new piece of information, seeing if it gives you a different, more clear picture to try to help you refine it, knowing that ultimately the drill hole is what's going to tell you whether that was all for naught or was useful. We're looking at and evaluating opportunities with some very new, interesting geophysical technologies, which are actually underground geophysical technologies. Like it's called Ideon Muon technology, which a place like Arrow and the Patterson Corridor has a lot of potential. We don't know yet, but the cost benefit when you look at it and say, well, if this works even half the way that it is contemplated to work, you can save a lot of drill hole drilling to find other arrows along that corridor. And then you can take that information and it kind of self-improves from there. So long and short of it is, yeah, we are absolutely always looking at new technology. We've demonstrated that in the past. We're continuing to do it as we speak today. But it is, ultimately, I agree with Tim and Jordan. There is an element that is always just kind of the same as it has been, as kind of like a basis, people and interpretations and geophysics and drilling. Really, ultimately, drilling is what tells you everything. So,
Great. Well, I always find it very interesting. I'm not a technical person, but I find exploration fascinating. One other question that I had was, everyone talked about working in Saskatchewan and how great an experience it is. I was curious about what's your experience been like with respect to the availability of supplies and services, i.e. drill rigs, contractors, lab turnaround times, etc. Maybe we'll go in the opposite direction and start with you this time, Travis.
Sure. Yeah, no, all of those things are totally available. Like we could have gone anywhere in the world looking for uranium, and we chose Saskatchewan, obviously, because there's the potential for high grades, but also there's stability of government, stability of law, rights. It's very transparent. You know what you need to do if you find something, but also the people and kind of call it institutional knowledge across the entire supply chain, not just, geology or mining or processing, but really all the ancillary services, whether it's catering or anything really, drilling, geophysics, et cetera. So you have this massive history of uranium specific knowledge and supply chains that are there. So we've always had great access to partners across the supply chain. Again, we can't say enough about the breadth of that, and also the willingness in areas to grow that if it's not there. Like, we've done a lot of work with the communities in our area to work with them to build capacity over time, and there's just huge motivation and willingness to do all of that, which isn't everywhere in the world. That's not the case everywhere. It's the case, at least in we can speak about our experience in that area in Saskatchewan, 100%. That motivation and everything's there to build capacity and get trained and make CapEx investments and everything associated with that. So we've deliberately taken an approach to that, and there's been a deliberate motivation to expanding those to a more local approach, because we basically treat it like a stone being thrown in the water. Like, we start where the rock goes in the water and we just go out from there. And to the extent that we have to go out from there, we say, why? Like, why can't it be in those local communities? And if there's some capacity funding issue or just general kind of capacity issue, well, let's work on doing that over time. Yeah, we might have to step out and go to another community in Saskatchewan or in the south of Saskatchewan or whatever. But we'll come back and try to get everything as close to the project as possible. And that's always been the focus, and huge reception to it.
Great. Tim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, not much. That was well put. I think, just on a bit more of a micro level, we have seen, increased activities in northern Saskatchewan in the last few years, certainly on the uranium side, given the downturn we had. So yeah, there's certainly, increased demand on geologists and on drillers. And, we've had good, strategic relationships with our drillers for a number of years. So, we continue to have great access. We've, when we've seen the market, improving on the geologist side, we've, taken the steps to bring people in full time as opposed to contractors. So, there's steps you can take, but as Travis pointed out, as you start to see maybe a lack of resources, it's only because the investment hasn't been there in the past. So, our view is the same. Like, we'll continue to invest if there's opportunities, and capital available, and there's work you want to do, then you just have to invest in those, those assets for the longer term. Bring the opportunities, to northern Saskatchewan. I can tell you, there's a lot of people that want good, high-paying jobs. They would love to get training. They would, there's a huge resource base available. So, you take some planning, longer term planning, start doing some providing some education, looking ahead to what you're going to need out in time. help develop that. And it pays off in big ways down the road. So yeah, it just takes some planning, but as Travis said, it's all available. It just, you need to recognize how to deploy it. Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I'd emphasize the local contractors and suppliers of whatever it may be. I know that's been, being in the basin for a while as our companies have, right? You have those relationships with the local companies. And I know at the project level, certainly with the exploration phase of things, it makes a big difference, right? We don't have the massive budgets. If things go wrong, the drill breaks down, the water's freezing, whatever may pop up, and these things do pop up. Having a competent contractor operator could be the difference between making a discovery or having a successful drill program or not. And so having those long-standing relationships and these groups and these companies and these operators knowing the projects well in northern Saskatchewan, having worked on them, certainly for us has been a key driver of value and success, and will continue to be going forward, I'm sure.
Okay. Staying, I guess, on the regional theme, can you talk about your ESG initiatives over the past 12 to 18 months and what's worked particularly well? Tim, maybe give you an opportunity to start.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're an early stage company. So what are we doing? We're exploring for uranium. So for us, the biggest part of that probably at this stage is working with the communities, in a very collaborative and sustainable way. And I can tell you that even in the last few months that I've been here, just starting to build stronger relationships. And there's a big desire for the communities that are involved around the projects where we are to get involved and to participate in a meaningful long-term way. And so I'd say for us, that's really the biggest part of the work we're doing, is to make sure that the work we're doing is being done in the most environmentally friendly way possible. We've got a lot of experience to draw on, having NexGen as a partner, looking at what they've done in the past to take the Arrow project forward. We're trying to deploy the same techniques, the same approach, the same culture to working with those communities, to working with the environment, with the government, and around our projects. And and I guess on the environmental, social, governance side, just working in nuclear in general, I think helping to promote the fact that the work we're doing it in the right way is also one of the best ways on the planet to create a strong, sustainable base load of energy going forward in the future. And not only that in general, but the fact that we're doing it in Saskatchewan, we've talked about it. There's a lot of geopolitical issues going on at the moment, but there's parts of the world that do things differently than we do. So not just on the nuclear side, but even the oil and gas side. If you come and you do that work in Saskatchewan or in Canada, compared to other places, in the world, you're doing it at a level and with a consciousness, I think that's at a, can often be much higher than other places. So yeah, we're just trying to apply all those principles and just do things the right way, and just, walk the walk when we're doing our work up north.
Mm-hmm. Jordan, do you have anything to contribute?
Yeah, no, look, we're an exploration company as well. And a big thing for us, as I pointed out, is, we are really focused on making sure there's employment opportunities for local stakeholders and the community in northern Saskatchewan. Obviously, as an exploration company, there is less of an environmental impact, but we want to make sure we are at doing the best we possibly can to leave without a trace, and working in Saskatchewan again. I think that's a good point that Tim brings up, is that there's a reason it's ranked number 2. And a big part of working in Saskatchewan is there's clear guidelines and on what to do, what not to do. There's industry best standards and practices that these companies, have to abide by. And a lot of cases go 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps further. And I know for us going forward, especially as these projects in our portfolio are advanced, this is going to become a bigger part of the story, and we're bringing in people as well and consultants to help advance this part of the business. And so, yeah, it's obviously paramount right now, ESG in general. All the way from the high level macro, which is we're finding the fuel for a clean energy future, and we're finding it in the number 2 mining district in the world, and so all the way down to the project level, right? That's, as I pointed out when I first started presenting today, with everything going on globally, I think it's important that investors do take a good long hard look at some of these what I would consider higher priority things when they're evaluating investment proposals and opportunities.
Agreed. Travis, NexGen's much more developed, so I'm sure you've got a lot more to add for the ESG. Maybe you can take a couple minutes to contribute.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I totally agree with what Tim and Jordan were saying. When you step down from the high level, yeah, uranium clean, totally. Being in Saskatchewan, yeah, just has a level that's unto itself. Like it's, in Canada generally, totally. So I'll just focus on Arrow and kind of like what we've been up to and the approach we've taken, which is really started before we started drilling, frankly. And then just kind of evolved naturally and kind of genuinely over time. It started as an example of kind of how this evolution happens. In our case is like you go in, the communities introduce yourselves before you start drilling. Hey, this is who we are. We're working, in your backyard, 155 kilometers away, but these are remote communities. We're in that area, and then start learning. Okay, there's maybe we need some breakfast for some kids that go to school. That would be helpful. Okay, start doing that. One of the kitchens, we need some new equipment and stuff. Okay, build new kitchen. Then what do we see? We see grades going up. We see attendance rates going up. So then that kind of parlays into this new generation of kids that now is for a number of reasons, one of which is some of the support that we've provided. Then it kind of parlays into, okay, they want to, have an opportunity, go explore, see what opportunities exist, because now they're getting good grades, feeling good. So we bring them up to site in the summer, do like summer student programs. And we've been doing that really, I think, since 2016 or 2015. And then that parlayed naturally again into, well, some of those kids are then go back into grade 12, get really good grades and can go to university. But, there's some gaps in funding or it's a challenge to get that. So we provide that for them. I think we've done that with eight kids now that are in post-secondary education and look across vocations. Like some are in environmental, some are in business, some are in geology, mining related studies. So that's just like kind of like a window of how we've approached it with respect to the communities. And again, I suggest everyone goes on our website. You can see a real nice window into it in video form. On the environmental side, we've always also looked at that. We made commitments to the government very early saying that like, we want you guys to be very, very proud of this project. Because, the departments in various ministries go all over the world and talk to their counterparties all over the world. And we want them to feel very proud and say, we have the best mine in the world environmentally and socially. It's in Saskatchewan, counterpart in Australia or Namibia or wherever, come check it out. We have it there. We made that commitment. And so we've been really focused on doing that. And like a case in point around that commitment has been the underground tailings management design. That's something that's never been done before. Technically, it can always have been done before. It's the same as paste backfill, which does happen in a lot of different mines. But we're just burdening ourselves with added cost. It adds about 21% to our sustaining capital and CapEx to build it. But what it means is that, when this mine's all said and done, when I'm an old man, we'll be able to dismantle the mill and there won't be any tailings at surface. So it really will just go back to the way that it was prior to us ever being there. So things like that, and then again, I talked about, even the ongoing reclamation when we were drilling, exploring, doing it from one pad location instead of others, reclaiming all the pad locations. We've always had a really big focus on it. It's been something that's really been a privilege for us. And as I said, like everyone at the company, they have to be genuinely committed to it, or they won't be here. That's just kind of a hard rule for us. So,
I think that's a really good summary. If you have any students that are interested in IR, let me know. We're always looking for young people to groom into our ways. I had one question that's kind of off the cuff. It came in through the audience Q&A, and I was wondering the same thing as well. I mean, it's not an accident that we have 3 companies that are based in the Athabasca Basin. We like that area. We think the potential there is huge. Obviously, a lot of things line up, but you were all picked because we like your land package, we like your projects, we like your management team, your structure, et cetera. Is there anyone I'm missing? Are there new discoveries that I might not have heard of, or a company that you would say should also be included in a panel like this in the basin or elsewhere? I'll just leave that kind of open. Feel free to jump in. If not, we can move on.
Well, I'll just start off, and not specific to the basin. Like I think there are, a company that I think is doing a really good job, or we think is doing a really good job, not at the exploration stage, but kind of advancing their project would be Boss Energy in Australia. Like they've got a very good team in place, a good plan in place, and they've got a good project to develop. So there's definitely, and there's there's not lots relative. I mean, the whole market capitalization is like $40 billion. So it's not, super pervasive in that, but there's lots of great people in the industry. It's a very small industry. Mining in general is, but uranium's even smaller. So, I think people that aren't doing good work don't last too long. I don't know, subject to Jordan and Tim's thoughts as well, but I would just say Boss is doing a great job.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that too, we've again, these companies have been around for a little while. We've seen, all kinds of markets, good, bad, really ugly. One of the things I think that's happened in the last 5 or 6 years, 7 years, call it, is you've had a consolidation of top tier projects, management, technical teams. As Travis pointed out, like it's a very small industry still. Yes, there's been new entrants, and there's still some great assets, and there's some new stories that are exciting. But I think it's important to highlight that the companies that did stick it out through the thin years, will benefit by basically consolidating a lot of these top tier assets and people, and it coming out on the other side, and will, I think, be able to create a lot of value, having just had that staying power. So look, there's lots of exciting companies, or a number of exciting companies. I don't like to use the word a lot because we're nowhere near where we were in 2006, 2007 with the number of uranium companies, but there's lots of interesting projects. And look, it's real simple. As the price of uranium goes up, some of these projects that 4, 5, 6 years ago no one was looking at do become interesting, right? So keep that in mind, right? As the price moves higher, the value of these assets does move up, and so you're going to see these maybe lower grade projects in other parts of the world that no one was looking at 3 or 4 years ago all of a sudden become interesting, right? And the value of the uranium in the basin as a high grade, lower cost pounds in the ground in really what I consider to be the best uranium jurisdiction in the world. Maybe there's more torque there, right? We'll see. But bottom line is all of these things are going to move higher as the price of uranium moves higher.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. I think, Jordan's right. There's projects that haven't got a lot of love or attention. There's also, decent maybe deposits that have been on the shelf. You're going to start seeing some of that, kind of pop up again. It's maybe been, just kind of, laying in the background for quite a while. Certainly there's companies like both have mentioned that are doing good work in the basin and other places. there hasn't been any, really big finds the last couple of years. There's a lot of companies starting to do work, and there's mineralization being found. There is, things that have the prospectivity to be exciting down the road. So yeah, I mean, stay tuned, because as you get access to capital, and all of a sudden there's people giving you calls and saying, hey, we have money we'd like to give you to do exploration work. That work is going to take place, and that hasn't been the case for very long. So there will be more and more interesting stories to come, I'm sure.
Agreed. And that's actually a good segue to what I wanted to talk about last, which is really just the overall kind of capital markets view on uranium, or what's changing there. Like Travis, you mentioned, it's tiny compared to the energy industry in terms of total market capitalization. We've seen institutional interest come in. I think you all have great shareholder registries with institutions, strategics, et cetera. I'd be interested in how you've seen that change and develop over the last little while, and also what you think of the SEC rejecting SPUT's New York listing yesterday. Who wants to go first?
Well, I can jump in. I mean, on SPUT, maybe just given, I did work on the UPC side, just share a couple of views. I don't know that it was that unexpected. It's been looked at before, and I think they didn't do any kind of basically. There's always, whether it's gold or other commodities in the U.S., there's a way to go in and reclaim that material, and there's no mechanism that the Sprott guys put forward. So I mean, it was always going to be a challenge. I mean, maybe it's just a first step, getting that into the U.S. listing. I mean, in uranium, it doesn't make sense like it does with gold. With gold, you can say, hey, I want to come claim my gold, back up a truck, and there it is. With uranium, it's much different. There's really no real reason for folks to be able to go in and pick that material up. So, practically speaking, it probably, it isn't maybe based on a lot of good reasoning, but we'll see. I think Sprott's also had more success raising money and doing what they, plan to do in the Canadian market than they ever expected when they first set up that fund, or they took it over and started applying kind of their processes to it. So, they've had great success. They've already built it, in a substantial way. So I think maybe in some ways, U.S. listing wasn't quite as important as it might have been when they first thought about the fund and took it over, but I'm sure they'll continue doing some work there.
Yeah, they've raised a lot of money through their ATM over the last little while.
Yeah, they really have. And they bought a lot of uranium, and you see it, like right now they've been trading at a discount. And as a result of them not being too active in the market price has gone down, because there's folks now that are kind of, the traders, whatever, that are counting on being able to sell to Sprott when they disappear. It doesn't mean there's a lot of material out there. Frankly, there isn't a lot of material to pick up, when Sprott does come to the market. But just the absence right now of buying is more, the reason for the price dropping than anything else. So fundamentally, nothing has really changed. So,
yeah, and I would just add, I think, the reality is that the reason they got rejected is actually a really big positive, if you think about it, because there was kind of a feeling among utilities, traders, even some investors that there will be a redemption feature and they will become a seller of the pounds that they sequester. And basically what Sprott and the SEC agreed to is that, no, there will not be that feature. We are taking the pounds and we're holding them, and they're not available for sale. So I think on that respect, it really became clear that, this is a one-way vehicle. They're taking pounds out of the market and they're not coming back. So anyone banking on that, any trader or utility banking on that in the future, I think got a clear shot across the bow with that decision that that's not happening.
Yeah, and I think that, that summarizes the SPUT news. I really, it's obviously a bit of a disappointment in the short term, but you look at what they've been able to do in less than a year. That capital's finding its way into that vehicle, whether it's listed in Canada or in the US. And, I as Travis pointed out, that's material that's staying in there. And I think that isn't getting talked enough about. But just getting back to the financing part of the question, because, I think this is important for all the companies here. No question, there's been more available capital. We're seeing that through financings. We're seeing that through ATMs. This capital is coming from all different places and sources, and not just, uranium bulls, but generalist investors and retail, institutional, family office, you name it. But I do still think there is quite a bit on the sidelines. As we pointed out, this is still a relatively small combined market cap, publicly traded companies that are active here. So there's still, I think, a lot of room to move. And at kind of more micro level, for companies like ours, there's new ways of raising capital. We've had we've had the traditional financings flow through, but we've had money come in from warrants being optioned. We've had money come in from option partner payments, right? These are other sources of capital versus just your traditional private placement or financing that at least over the last year for us has been quite effective and has also helped limit equity dilution. And I want to emphasize that I do think it's the early days, and I think there as more and more people and investors are convinced that this sector has a lot of legs still, you're going to see more and more capital come off the sidelines into these companies.
So you have seen it easier to raise money over the past 12 to 18 months, seeing new investors come in, things like that?
Yeah. I mean, and like Travis pointed this out, the liquidity just in the open market. I mean, that we've seen a pretty immense tick up in that across the board, not just with the large companies, but with all the way down to the small cap companies. So, this sector, obviously, people are buying, they're selling, they're trading, they're paying attention to it. And again, I still think there is room to move, quite a bit of room to move.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I would also just add, Jordan brought up a good point, but on the flow through thing, Canada just incorporated uranium as a critical mineral for additional flow through tax benefits. I think that's going to be great for the sector specifically, but it also signifies where governments are putting uranium now, which is in that critical mineral bucket. It's kind of went through a period where it was lost. No one knew, like there's people grouping it with coal, which obviously made no sense. There's people not grouping it in a critical mineral, but saying maybe it's kind of green. And then, the EU taxonomy framework comes out, 3-year study, science-based, it's green, nuclear is green. That's still going to get ratified, but then you see South Korea point to that and say, we got to double down on nuclear. Look at what the EU did. It is green. Debate's over. Now places like Canada, the US, adding uranium kind of like formally, not just putting some money towards future technologies and stuff, but actually saying, no, we need a pipeline of uranium coming from these jurisdictions now. It's great for everyone on this call and everyone that's involved in the sector, frankly.
Agreed. Tim, anything to add in?
Oh, I think they've covered it, but you're right. Like we haven't had any trouble. The phone calls have been coming with respect to people interested in putting money in to allow us to do some work. It's great for us because, as I mentioned before, we've picked up, we've got 24 great high quality projects that, over time we'd like to do some work on. And what we're being told by the market is, we're supportive of that. We're willing to give you capital to continue working those projects and maybe make our company a multi-asset company, organically through the projects we have. So that's great. And just to build on what Travis said, I mean, yeah, the support's coming everywhere. And even countries like France that have been the biggest nuclear power countries in the world, 75% their power come from nuclear energy. A few years ago, they were saying we're gonna shift down and maybe go to 50%. And even seeing changes like them just recently announcing we're going to build 6 more reactors and making a complete shift, especially with what's happening with Russia. No desire to get on the hook for Russian gas. I mean, those kinds of things are going to have massive impacts. And you see it in Britain announcing more reactors and again, South Korea reversing what seemed like a crazy call to kind of go away from nuclear after spending and becoming a real world leader. And now they're going, no, that was the wrong decision. We're going back to that. So I think, Jordan mentioned before, I think it's the beginning of a bull market. Well, I think it's the beginning of just a long, sustainable market. And I saw one of your questions, somebody on there said, are you going to, make this cycle? And I really don't see it as these up and down cycles. I mean, you'll have ebbs and flows for sure, but I see it as the beginning of a really long, sustainable nuclear story globally. And it doesn't matter if we're 5 years away, 2 years away, if you're a NexGen or if you're a Skyharbour or an IsoEnergy, the world's going to need uranium from a good geopolitical area for decades to come. So I think it all just, all the signposts are really pointing in the right direction.
I agree. Actually, that's a better summary than I could have done, Tim. So rather than try and reinvent the wheel, I think that's a really good ending to the session. Plus, we're a little bit over the hour, and I'm sure you all have important things to do. Was there anything I missed that you wanted to talk about?
From my perspective, just thanks, George. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Deborah, and the whole team at Adelaide. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks to all of you, and thanks for supporting our cause. I think after today, we're going to be halfway to our target. So hoping to be able to bring our friend over to Canada and her whole family, because I think there's 7 of them. So that'll be good. Or maybe they'll get to go back to Ukraine. That's, I think, what she would love to do, but a little bit challenging. Her village was one of the ones that was the hardest hit. So I'm sure there's going to be a long rebuild there. But yeah, I appreciate everyone participating, everyone that's donated their time and their money to our cause. And yeah, really appreciate getting an update on the uranium space. I think it's certainly interesting times and early days for the sector. So loved hearing all your views. And yeah, if anyone has any further questions or would like to be put in touch with any of the companies that presented, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to make those intros. And everyone have a great afternoon.